Hey, how's it going, guys? So we are here at the 533 build room, and I am building the Lightswitch HD. I have the motors installed already, and my ESC, and my frame built, and everything. So you want to make sure your ESC is on the build when you're doing your motors. So I went ahead and installed all that, and we can go ahead and continue on to the next steps, and this is going to make it a whole lot easier. I'm going to show you all the components that go in it. So here's top down. And we have the Lucid Flight Controller, Crossfire Pro, DJI O4, Newbie Drone GPS. Here's the standoffs. Here's a capacitor and a lead. And this is the TPU and the top plate. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is you're going to want to cut your motor wires. And the way you cut your motor wires is you start from the nearest motor wire to the nearest pad, and then you're going to cut on the other side of the pad, just like that. We're going to do that to all of the motor wires. You don't want to pull them too tight because you want them all to fit, and that's why we're going on the other side of the pad. Everything is about prep. You want to prep everything and then start soldering. So if I go ahead and cut everything and get everything ready, that's less time that I have to use soldering. Alright, there's one side. Put the middle in the middle pad right here. And the furthest one on the furthest one on the third pad. And then we're going to do the last motor here. You can also kind of curl them around like this and see where they need to go. This is our last wire here. Alright, you can take all these wires and you can discard them. Some people like to keep them for other projects. Alright, so now we're just going to pull the tip of the insulation off of the wire. You only want to expose the tip. You don't need too much wire. As long as the wire makes contact with the pad, that is the key point. Alright, there we go. We have the tip of the wire off and make sure there's no strands hanging out of the wire on the end. That way it's all nice and pretty. Now we can start soldering. I got my solder gun set at 450 degrees Celsius. I'm going to solder all the tips of the wires. Now I'm going to also solder all the pads. Alright, we pre-soldered the motor wires. Clean our tip off. Now we're going to go to the pads. You want to be kind of fast with this because you want all the flux to stay in that solder. This is no clean flux, so I don't have to worry about cleaning it off afterwards. If you use no clean flux, that's going to help you out and keep you from saving a step from having to clean after soldering. Alright, we have all the motor pads soldered in. Now we're going to do our lead pads. And what I like to do is just tap it on there, that way I get the most flux. And you don't want to solder those very heavy. You just want a little bit. Alright, now we can start installing the motor wires. Starting with the nearest first. You want to be kind of quick with this. The less heat that you have transferring through the CSC, the less possibility that you have on messing up any components in the ESC. If you get in a tight spot, you can kind of curl your wire a little bit like this. Got one more on this side. There we go. Those are nice and pretty solders. You can lay the wires nice and neat beside each other. Now we can do the other side. See how those lay nice and neat? If you ever have problems with shaking or anything like that, you can hold your hand on the desk and not in the air, and that will keep you more steady while you're doing this. Alright, we got the motor wires on there nice and neat. Now we're going to do the lead. The lead is kind of the hardest part on soldering to the ESC. You want to get the right length. So the right length is just right underneath the drone, and this lead is going to be too long. So on the Lightswitch HD, what I do is I use 2 thumb widths. Then I cut it right here. Alright, now you want to just strip the wire, just the tip of it, not much. Make it as even as possible when you strip it. Now, we're soldering in a tight spot here, so what I want to do is, I kind of want to pinch my wire. That way it's standing up a little bit vertically. Alright, I'm going to come over to the hands. And you can't see the hands, so I'm going to try to do over here. We'll prop this up. There we go. And I do the same way as I've done the pads. I just tap it on there. That way I get the most flux. If you see wires sticking out, just use your iron and kind of push them back in. Alright, you don't have to get them perfect because we're going to make them look pretty on the ESC itself. So on this one, the negative's on the left. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at an angle. And I'm going to push down. And then I'm going to add a little bit more solder. Then we'll grab my tweezers. That way I can position this in place. You wait until the solder starts to flow all the way to the pad below it. And once it does, that means you have a good cohere to the pad, just like that. We're going to continue to the other side, do the same thing. Make sure your lead is nice and straight. And then we'll put the iron on it like this. Add a little bit more solder. Grab our tweezers to align it. Push it down till it sinks and let go. And there you go. You have both sides soldered on. Now you want to inspect it. You have a lot of solder that you just used right here. You used a lot of solder, so you want to make sure you don't have any solder balls. You want to check below the ESC, on the ESC, and anything that you see, you need to just pick it off and tweezer it off. It's something that we always do, is an inspection after doing the lead. That way you make sure you don't leave any traces of solder around. And there we go. We have a nice coherence, and now we need to add a capacitor. So the negative is going to go negative. We're going to take this lead and we're going to bend it straight down. And then you're going to cut both leads. And I'm going to say it's about a 1/2 inch. You do not want to lose these two parts that you cut off, because if it goes into that motor, then it's going to stop that motor. So always discard the 2 ends. Now, I I take my capacitor and lay it down like this, and then I'm going to pre-solder my capacitor.
What's the field of view like for the?
This is how you pre-solder the capacitor.
It's good.
And once the capacitor is pre-soldered, you can now install it.
I didn't tell it that. What did you glue it in on the center?
There's a 3D print somebody made.
Yeah.
You need to screw it in.
So I'm just going to lay it on top,
I glue it up.
and then I'm going to heat up my solder pad, and then release. Just hold it there for a second. Now I'm going to do the other side.
Could I take Ginger and Turbo to pick up Sam from soccer?
Release. There you go. That's nice and neat.
If it's flat,
And I'm just going to pull this straight and kind of hold it down. That way it lays down whenever I put it together. All right. Now this is all together. Give it one last inspection. Double check and make sure I don't have any solder balls in the ESC or on top of the ESC or below the ESC. And what I see, it looks good. All right. Now I'm going to take my flight controller. I'm going to put the link between the flight controller and the ESC. Make sure you look at the pins before you plug it in because you don't want to bend those pins. That's very important. Also, you want to put your gummies on your flight controller. Now, this Lucid flight controller, all the pads are on the bottom of the flight controller. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the flight controller upside down on this build, and I'm just going to change it in Betaflight. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want to access all of my solder points. If I have access to all my solder points, then I'll be able to solder on it a whole lot easier. And it's no big deal to flip it around in Betaflight. So I don't like to twist my connector wire up. I like to just fold it over once and kind of tuck it in a little bit. And now I'm going to mount my flight controller. The cool thing about the Lucid is it's a whole lot easier to do it in stages, and the mounting on it is very unique, but that's how you mount the flight controller on the Lucid instead of using nuts. Alright, now I need to place my solder pads for the receiver and also the GPS. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to always put receiver on R1, because if you think about it, what is the first thing that you plug in? What's the first thing you turn on when you turn on a drone? You turn on your controller. So I just keep in mind that my receiver needs to be on R1. So on Crossfire and LRS, a lot of them are the same way. Starting from the left to the right, when you turn the antenna down, you have negative, positive, TX, and RX.
Yeah. What do we have for?
So the way I do all of these is I go ahead and I pre-solder my Crossfire with the antenna down.
Skip.
Yes, what do you want?
UDL cam mount.
I do not have a UDL cam mount.
Do you know where the file is?
The file is... Let's see here. I might have one.
For HD0.
You want the cage itself or just the mount?
Both.
Okay. There was a cage over there.
I think I saw it in the box.
It was blue.
But he wants a black one, so we got a print one anyways.
Yeah. So You got two files you got to print, just the cage mount and
Is it on one of these?
which UDL is it? Is it for the LuxCam or EcoCam?
You built this guy, Alex Gus.
Okay, well I'll print it here in a second.
Can I print it like right now?
Yeah, you can.
Where is it in there?
Yeah.
In UDL or something?
Yeah, it looks just like
There's like a cage and then a box, right?
yeah.
Okay. Hopefully we get it printed. Thank you. Sorry to bother. Sorry.
That's all right. All right. So now over here is where my GPS is going to be. I put my GPS on the UARTs next to SDL and SDA. So your GPS gets a 5 volt, a ground, R7, T7, SDA, SCL. And then over here is going to be for my receiver, 5 volt, R1, T1, ground. Now you see I bridged this pad over here, and an easy way to get a pad unbridged is you're going to take and clean your tip off, and then you're just going to swipe over it. Just like that. You can put a little bit more solder on each pad. And if you look, I've got a ball of solder on each pad. So I'm going to solder this this receiver up. Just need the end of the wire stripped. I'll take my solder, stand it up like this, and then I'm going to solder pre-solder each wire on the end of it. All right, now starting from the left, we got ground, 5 volt. It's going to be red. TX, that's going to be white. RX, that's going to be yellow. Once you get your receiver soldered up, I like to go ahead and twist my wires up. So I'll hold my wires straight and at the end like this, and then I just twist the receiver. This is going to make them nice, neat, and tight. It's going to reduce noise through the drone so you don't mess with your gyro. All right. Now I'm going to slip over my shrink wrap. Then I'm going to put on my antenna. Put my shrink wrap in place. Now I'm going to heat that up. You just want to get it start to shrink and then turn it over and do the other side. You don't want to do it too much. If you do it too much, you'll mess with the components on the receiver itself. Once you get it done, pinch both sides. That's going to make a nice and tight seal on the receiver. We're going to turn it back over. Now we're going to take double-sided tape. We're going to cut one square of double-sided tape. And then we're going to take this square and mount it on the back of the receiver opposite from the antenna. And we'll pull that off. How strong what is? This double-sided tape is 3M, and it's really good tape, so it holds it on the frame, and once it's been sticking there for a while, it's kind of permanent. It's really hard to get off, so don't be afraid to use 3M double-sided tape. It's called Extreme Mounting Tape by Scotch. We're going to tuck this receiver right here behind the ESC, hold it down for a little bit, and then cover it up with the wires, and right there is where we have our receiver kind of tucked away on our frame. Alright, so now I'm going to bring my wires around to this side, and then I'm just going to cut my wires. That way I have just enough wire to mount it. Now I'm going to strip the end of the wire off, just like doing everything else. We just want to get the end of the wire stripped. Make sure our wires are nice and straight. Now, our GPS wire, we want this wire, it's going to go to the back and up and around this plate. So you can kind of put it where it needs to be right here, and kind of get an idea of where it's going to go. And you always want to leave, it's a whole lot easier to make it a little bit long than too short. So get a good idea where it's going to go. I'm going a little bit longer than where it needs to go. That way I have plenty of length. Now I'm going to cut that. Now, this type of wire that has the plastic insulation on it, you don't have to worry about stripping it. You can just stand up your solder like this, and then you take your soldering iron and the wire, and you're just going to get you a little ball started on your solder started on your soldering gun, your soldering iron, and then you're going to just touch the tip of the wire. This plastic insulation will actually peel back itself, so you don't have to worry about stripping it. And really all you need is the end of the wire anyways. So now we got all of our wires pre-tinned. We're going to take, and I'm going to hold this wire by the end like I did the other one. I'm going to start twisting. And I don't want to, I want to kind of grab the wires and twist with the wires. I don't want to grab the plug and mess up the wires in the plug. So I just twist the wires like this. And it takes a little while to get all nice and twisted up, but it's going to look good. It's worth the time that you put into it, making it nice and neat. Alright, now we're mounting the GPS wire. If you take the GPS, you'll see on top of the GPS the pinout, so you'll know what wire is what. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in, and it tells me on my pinout that SDL is green. So that, or SCL is green. So I'm going to start from the furthest away and work towards me. SCL is green. SDA is blue. Then we have yellow and brown. Yellow is going to be RX. So I'm going to put RX on TX and TX on RX. And the reason why you put RX on TX and TX on RX is because you got transmitting and receiving. TX is going to be transmitting, receiving is going to be RX. And then you got 5-volt and ground. All right, now we're going to solder in our receiver. And if you notice, I've done all the solder work at once. I prepped everything, done all the solder on the flight controller at once. That's going to save you a whole lot of time. So on my receiver, I've got to pre-tin my wires. Make sure it's nice and twisted. Got my wires pre-tinned. All right, now I'm going to start with 5-volt. It's a little long on the end. I'm just going to trim it off a little bit. All right, then you have RX, which is going to be RX to TX. So the white wire is TX, and the yellow wire is RX. And then we got ground. All right, now everything is soldered up. You want to look, inspect it, make sure you don't have any solder balls, make sure you don't have any bridges. And what a bridge is when you have two pads connecting each other. So we want to make sure there is nothing going in between these solder points. So now we're going to give it a test plug. So you're going to take a battery and a smoke stopper. You're going to put the battery on the smoke stopper. You'll see yellow light. If you push this, you get a blue light. It's very important to always test everything with a smoke stopper. It will save your components in the long run. Turn it on. We have the GPS is lit up. The crossfire is blinking. That means it's all working. We also got tones. So if you listen, you can hear the tones. We got the first tones, and now the second tones. And the second tones is what you're listening for. If you get the second tones, that means you're doing something right. All right. Now we're going to mount the standoffs. So we got our screws here. We're going to drop in our screws. I do 2 at a time. Put your fingers on it, flip it over. Screw it on by hand. There's the back standoffs. Now we're going to do the rear, or the front, I'm sorry. Hold both of them. Make sure you don't pinch any wires when you're doing this. All right, we are almost there. So now we have our TPU. We're going to install our antenna mount on our crossfire antenna. Be very careful with this. You're going to have to flex your antenna, and you don't want to break your antenna off. So be very careful installing this. It's pretty robust. You don't have to be super careful, but you just don't want to pull this antenna out of the middle piece. All right, now I'm going to put the antenna facing down onto the standoffs. I want to make sure my wire is going in between the middle, like this, just like that. Put it on the standoffs. Push it on down. And it should fit really nice underneath the bottom of the drone, just like that. Okay, we're going to take this lead and put it on top. I'm going to raise my capacitor and like kind of wedge that wire in there so it doesn't move. So that wire should not move now. I'm going to kind of roll up my GPS a little bit nicer here. Okay. Now we have our air unit here. We're going to take our parts out of our bag for our DJI air unit. We have the gummies and the screws and everything. You're going to use every bit of it. Take the lens cover off the air unit. Put the mount on the air unit. We're going to put the gummies with the long side towards the back of the air unit where the sticker is. That's where the long side of the gummy is going to go. You don't want to put tension on the MIPI cable, so be aware of that. You want to take, and after you have the gummies on, you want to turn your antenna 180 degrees, pointing towards the front like this, because it's going to double over. So your antenna is going to have a mounting unit or a TPU for the antenna. There you go. And then we have a 20 by 20 mount that turns it into a 25 by 25 mount for the air unit. We're going to go ahead and stick that on towards the tape, and you're going to put the nuts on the USB side. All right, now that's being mounted with the M2 nuts and screws. We're going to take our camera power wire for our ear unit, and we're going to twist it up nice and neat, just like this. You don't want to get it super tight, but get it a little bit tight, and then I kind of like to relax it and then smooth it out, make it nice. There we go. All right, so now you're going to mount this onto your top plate, and how you're going to do that is with the antenna facing the rear. All right, so I'm going to turn it over, have the antenna facing the rear. Now, on our build, we have the GPS unit going on top, and our GPS unit mounts to our air unit. And as you can see, that fits nice and tight. And this mount makes it look really nice in the build because it all mounts up together. Once you get your screws tight on one side, you just go to the other side, do the other side the same way.
You have pliers? I think this is the ticket. Oh, here we go. This lens is always super narrow FOV. It's super linear.
There you go. Made this one a little bit too tight. I'm going to back it off just a little bit.
Huh? What made you hate it? Because you needed to see, like, just narrow FOV, and of course it's more. It's awesome. I like it.
There we go. That's on there nice and neat now. See how that's mounted? You got the UFL to the rear. That's going to go like this. This is going to fold over like this. And now we're going to just flip this over. Oh yeah, we also got to put, so this is going to go, the MIPI mount is going to go up onto the camera mount. We're going to use the original screws that comes with it. You're going to need a 1.5 mil screwdriver. Screw it in just like that. I do the opposite corners. That way I make sure everything's lined up. Makes it a little bit faster. You can do it however you want though. Now we have the full top plate assembled. And all we got to do is just drop it in, which makes it really nice for this build. This is assembled, ready to go. We just take our drone and we're going to drop in our camera. Make sure we don't pinch any wires on the motor wires on the side, so we're just going to be mindful of that. There's our camera. Now I'm going to take my GPS wire and I'm going to run my GPS wire under the unit. This is going to come up and plug into my GPS, and I'm going to also plug in my unit. So I'm going to hold it up just like this, grab the power wire for the 04 unit, make sure my pins are facing the right direction, and I'm going to carefully plug that in to the bottom of the flight controller. There we go. It's plugged into the bottom of the flight controller right there. Take my antenna mount, put it down, So now I'm going to plug in my GPS. You want to match the pins on the GPS also. There you go. GPS is plugged in. Everything is plugged in. Everything looks nice and neat. And now we are ready to screw on the top plate. Make sure you're not smashing any wires whenever you screw on the top plate. If you do it like this, you shouldn't have many wires in the way or anything. Once you get everything mounted and together, you're going to do one last thing, and that's you're going to check every screw on the frame. You don't want any loose screws on the frame, and that's going to be a very important step of ending this build, is making sure all these screws are nice and snug. They don't have to be super tight, but it is nice to make them nice and snug. So I'm going to go over and check every screw on this drum. It's very easy to miss a screw, and that's the last thing you want to do. And there you go. This is what it looks like when it's completed. You have a nice, compact Lightswitch HD with a 04 unit GPS and crossfire. Alright guys, so this completes our build with the 533 Lightswitch HD, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this, and I'll leave in the description below where you can get this drone, and if you guys would like to see some flight footage on that, leave a comment below and we'll show you us flying it around. But it's been a solid build for us, and we really like it, and it works great on GPS. So you know, check it out yourself, and hope you enjoy it. All right, guys, thanks.